All right. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. We have an action-packed Elite 100 today. It's great to see you guys here. I want to jump right into it. We have an amazing guest with us. Before we get going, though, I don't want to skip the mastermind principles. So I'm going to ask that Mr. Lenny Romanowski read those really quick for us with energy and love, kick us off on the right foot, and then we'll get going.
I would love to. That is perfect. All righty. I release myself to the mastermind because I am strong when I have others to help me. I believe the combined intelligence of the mastermind creates a wisdom far beyond my own. I understand that I will more easily create positive results in my life when I am open to looking at myself, my challenges, and opportunities from another's point of view. I decide to release my desire totally and trust to the mastermind, and I am open to accepting new possibilities. I forgive myself for mistakes I have made. I also forgive others who have hurt me in the past, so I can move into the future with a clean slate. I ask the mastermind to hear what I really want, my goals, my dreams, and my desires, and I hear my mastermind partner supporting me in my fulfillment. I accept, I know, relax, and accept, believing that the working power of the mastermind will respond to my every need. I am grateful knowing this is so. Dedications and covenant. I now have a covenant in which it is agreed that the mastermind shall supply me with an abundance of all things necessary to live a success-filled and happy life. I dedicate myself to be of maximum service to the world and my fellow human beings, to live in a manner that will set the highest example for others to follow, and to remain an open channel of God's will. I go forth with a spirit of enthusiasm, excitement, and expectancy.
I love it. Thanks, brother. Thank you for that. I love kicking off with that. And those principles are tried and true and sound. So a little bit of housekeeping before we go forward. If you guys remember Devin and Cody, about 8 months ago or something, they presented a company called Breakout to us, which was a competitor to Clubhouse. Well, since then, they've gotten a ton of funding, a ton of support. If you guys followed Clubhouse, they went all the way to a $4 billion valuation, then started tanking because they had no way to monetize the channel. So a lot of their key influencers left. Well, Devin and Cody scooped them all up and gave them equity in the company. And they learned in there's a bunch of ways to monetize the channel. So I had a very in-depth meeting with them yesterday because they're also helping us launch Contact Ninja. It's the same development team. So for those interested, we're going to do a special meeting Thursday at 6. We'll record it, but I highly suggest you show up and see where they're at, because they are poised to be the next great social media platform. They've really positioned themselves well, and I think they have a lot of traction, a lot of legs, a lot of key people behind them, and there's a very small cleanup round before they go into a Series A, so we get a little bit of an opportunity there. Again, if you're interested and you're an investor, that'll be Thursday at 6, and I'll put the link in the WhatsApp group. But the reason I'm so excited today, guys, is one of my close friends, a mentor of mine, another mentor of mine, and arguably the world's leading author coach. In my opinion, she's helped some very, very serious people with books and programs and getting out there. She's a professional author coach. She's a money-making machine is the best title I've ever heard. And it's so true. I've seen her materialize $1 million in a day or a couple of days over a weekend. And I believe, Peggy, that you were Bob's longest running mentee, student, I would say.
Yeah, I met him in January 1979.
Shoosh. So, everybody here has obviously followed Bob, been through Thinking and Results, Lead the Field. That's a commonality of all we're here. So I'm super excited that you said yes when I asked you to come here and just share with these people kind of what you do. And a lot of people here are wanting to write books or have written books and looking to monetize them. So I think this is going to be super impactful. And I want to just give you the floor so we have as much time as possible for you to present and also get to, Q&A.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Brian. I really appreciate the invitation. When I received the invitation from Brian to come here and to share with you, it was originally about writing a book. And I suggested to him, let's talk about the multiple sources of income that you can generate from a book. And he said, even better. He said, I think it'd be more appropriate for our group here of very wealth-minded, success-oriented individuals that are in this mastermind. And I have written and released, actually I haven't written, but I've released 20 books in the world. And I'll talk about that in a few minutes. I've released 20 books in the world, been on the New York Times bestseller list. I have books in almost 40 languages, sold in over 100 countries in the world, and have earned and generated millions and millions of dollars from the area of expertise that I chose to be in. And what's fascinating about all of that is not, oh, good for you, Peggy, for all your accomplishments, but what I've learned along the way and what can be of value to you is really what I want to share. Because as you know, when we look back, 2020 vision gives us a lot of clarity and a great understanding. And I have worked with thousands of authors over the years, and many of them I find just leave money on the table. They think that, they write a book and they get their book out there in the world, maybe make it a bestseller or put it as a bestseller in a category on Amazon, and that they've wound up or landed on easy street. And that's not necessarily the case. It's not necessarily the way it is. And so there's so much more that can be done. And I've written books in fiction category and in nonfiction books. I've written books that have been used as lead generators that were designed to lead people to programs or other offerings that I have. And I've had books that I've used as lead generators that not only were lead generators, but also I sold as well. And, our common friend, Brian, and my common friend, Bob Proctor, used to say that his book that he wrote in 1984 was the greatest lead generator that he ever had for his business. And he was very confident in saying that. And he wasn't saying that, to pat my back, because I had nothing to do with him writing that book or bringing it out to the world. But the truth is, when you do write a book, and some of you may have already written a book, but there's a stigma that's attached that just says, oh, this must be a person of authority. They must know what they're talking about. But what I would like to just instill in you is where there are even greater opportunities for you, ways that you can be earning money, while you sleep. And it doesn't mean you're not doing any work at all. You do the work in advance, but there is a way that you can be earning money, and you could be on a beach in an island somewhere and still be generating income. And it could be significant income. And there's multiple ways to go with that. I often smile when I see an email land in my inbox and it's another registration for one of my programs that requires 0 of my time, but yet it still serves people, and it serves people in very positive ways. So that's what I want to give you some guidance on today. I'm totally open to questions. You can ask me questions anytime. You can type them in the chat box, raise your hand, whatever you want to do. I am here to serve you. And so for this period of time that we are here together, if a question pops in your mind, I don't mind being interrupted. I'm not that anal retentive speaker that will hold your questions to the end of the class kind of thing. So I'm going to start with my latest book. I've written 20 books, as I mentioned, and the last 2 books that I wrote in the fiction category, and I wrote them as parables. And one of them is called Savvy Wisdom, and the other one's called Savvy Wisdom 2. And what I recommend that all of you do is go to Amazon and buy them. Yes, I'm pushing my books, but absolutely recommend you buy them and read them as well. But I want to talk to you about what sort of was the driving factor behind this and the creation of this, and how it can be a multiple source of income as well. And so I have a team that work with me, and I've been in the personal development industry since 1994. It's when I incorporated my business. And I started writing in the year 2000. So I've been in the book industry for as well many, many years. And so a number of years ago, Bob Proctor and I were doing a program together called Making $1 Million Look Small. And it was a live event that we ran over a period of a weekend. We also ran events online. Bob and I actually taught together how to create multiple sources of income online. That was fun, 2 very non-technical people, but, helping people understand that. But one of the things that I did when we were delivering content for Making $1 Million Look Small is, because I was in the author space I still am, but that was part of what I did and how I serve people. I did a presentation on authors that have earned 100 million or more. So just significant, right? Like getting people thinking a little bit differently, which I know is a big part of what you do here, Brian, in your masterminds. Get people thinking a little more expansively and differently, and bring all these tremendous opportunities for them. And so what I noticed, though, when I was doing the research for the presentation on these authors that had generated $100 million or more, is the majority of them are fiction authors, interestingly enough. And think about this as an example. If you've read the book 50 Shades of Grey, now I won't ask you because it might embarrass some people, but 50 Shades of Grey, I mean, you have to be living under a rock to not be familiar with, that book series or the movie or whatever. But did you know that that author, that was her first book, and that she was highly criticized for her terrible writing style when it was released? I don't know if you know that or not, but she was. And so some people might be thinking, oh, I'm not even a great writer. You don't have to be a great writer. You don't even have to write it. And I'll talk about that in a moment, but you do not have to be a great writer. But was that author, feeling concerned about what people thought of her when she received her $90 million in the first year that she was an author? Because that's what she earned. And it was the fastest growth in the history of time. And just, like if you've read the book, I read them, I found them quite interesting. And if you read the books, I mean, you just think about, there's a topic, would you think people might be interested in that? Well, yeah, they are. And obviously took off and became a series and became a movie and et cetera, et cetera. I don't know whether she had that vision of that in the first place, but the point that I want to get at is fiction, and anyone can write a fiction book. And also fiction books can be made into movies. And right now, Phil Goldfine, who I know is part of your mastermind, is he's working on the screenplay for Savvy Wisdom. It's being shopped to be turned into a movie as well. And in my mind, the outcome of that is already done. I mean, I already have my Oscar. It's a replica, if you will, for visionary purposes. And it says, best motion picture Savvy Wisdom. So there's another potential source. But what happened was my team had sent me a list of videos that they wanted me to create for social media. And I would go through this list and create videos and send them to them, and they would post them. And so I just go down the list and check them off and go to the next item list. And so this one day I opened up my list of potential videos to create, and there was a suggestion there for me to create a video on how I wrote my first fiction book. Well, I hadn't written a fiction book, and I'm a very authentic, real person. For any of you that know me, I know Peggy and Dan fairly well, and I'm just, as you see me, as I am, very authentic, very real. So my first thought was, I can't do a video on how I wrote my first fiction book. I haven't written one. I know what's required in writing fiction because I studied it and I taught a class on it, and I've read fiction books, but I hadn't written one. So then I asked myself this question, and you guys could be asking yourself this question as well, especially when you heard me just say that, that E.L. James earned $90 million in her first year releasing her fiction book, is do I want to? And that's what I asked myself. Do I want to write a fiction book? And then I thought about it and I thought, yeah, I would like to write a fiction book. And in my study, I met Bob in January 1979. One of my favorite styles of books are parables, books that are written, as a story, but yet they have some very valuable message or inspiring message, like Richest Man in Babylon, or The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. Robin Sharma actually was a client of mine, or any of Og Mandino's books, The Greatest Salesman in the World. And they're all written in a parable style. And I loved that style. So I made a decision. That I'm going to write a fiction book. And this is the power of a decision. And not only am I going to write it, I'm going to write a great book. And I'm going to write it in the next 10 days. Now, I'm a busy person. I've got a pretty busy calendar, and it wasn't like I had 10 days wide open in my agenda. I don't think I've had 10 days wide open in my agenda since 1963 when I was 5. But anyways, I just decided, okay, I'm going to do this. And so, Bob taught me that work will expand to the time allotted. So I set the date. I'm going to have this finished by November 10th. And I didn't know what it was going to be called. Didn't know what the story would be, didn't know where the story was going. I just decided I'm going to get into the spirit of writing an amazing book, and I'm going to block off time, and I'm going to, dedicate that time, close the door of my office, shut off technology and write, and just allow it to flow to and through me. And anyone can do this. And so even the title, Savvy Wisdom, wasn't even there yet. I didn't know who, what the name would be of this character, but I decided I would base it on my life and meeting Bob Proctor. And because when I met Bob Proctor, I was previously suicidal, and it's not a great place to be. And it's in the past. It is what it is. I don't have any emotional attachment to that whatsoever now. But, it's not like Bob saved my life. Peggy saved Peggy's life. But I was going through a very obviously challenging time. And so the story starts with a young girl, and this actually did happen. I was a teenager, and I had gone to a park because I was going to kill myself. And that's where the story starts. So what I did was I asked a very good friend of mine who's a phenomenal fiction writer. I told her what I was doing, and I said, I want you to give me feedback. I'll write chapter and send it to you. You give me feedback, as I'm going through. And she did that. And so the story totally flowed. Savvy is the name of the character that I gave. That's Bob. And Savvy, it's S-A-V-Y. I did not spell it incorrectly. I have so many people saying, you spelled savvy wrong. No, I didn't. Read the book and you'll understand. And so it stands for a name. I won't tell you the name because you have to read the book to find out what it is. But it starts with this girl going to a park to end her life, and she's inconsolable, and she's sitting on this park bench, and she's crying, and she's not aware of anything around her. And all of a sudden she sees out of the corner of her eye a handkerchief being handed to her. And this gentleman, elderly gentleman, had come and sat down at the end of the bench. And the handkerchief she used obviously to dry her tears and blow her nose, but it had something embroidered on it. And the embroidery said, if you want your life to change, you must change. And that was the end of the first chapter. And then it goes on to the next chapter, and then goes on until the book is finished. I never planned on doing a sequel either, but I'll tell you about that in a second. So I wrote that book in 9 days. And at the end of the book, I wanted to have the book end with a letter from Savvy to Sophie. And since the book was based on Bob Proctor, I decided to email Bob. And so I sent him an email, said, hey, Bob, I'm writing my 19th book. This is what it is. It's based on, you're Savvy, I'm Sophie, and I'd love for you to write the final letter. He had just checked into some resort east of the city in Toronto with Gina, and they were working on a program, and he was there to get this program done. And he said to me, yeah, sure. I'll take a look at it and I'll get back to you. And the next morning he called me and he said, I'm mad at you. And I said, why? He said, you kept me awake all night. I couldn't stop reading. He said, I was so addicted to it. He said, I started and I could not put it down. And so a day later, I got the final letter from Savvy to Sophie, which he wrote. He actually wrote that final letter. And so then, in the creation of the book, because I know what I know, I also created a program. And this was actually Bob's prompting, but I had been thinking about it already. He said, create a program called Savvy's Proven Success Principles, and pull out all the lessons from the book, because it is written as a story, but pull out all the lessons so that it, you can, put something in the back of the book and you can make it available to the readers. And so I did. I had that program done, and I don't even know how long it took me, probably a matter of a couple of days. I got it done, got it online. I've been marketing online for many years. I had my website up in 1995. And so I did that. And then in the back of the book, it has a reference to Savvy's Proven Success Principles, where once people read the book, they can go there and they can find out about Savvy's Proven Success Principles, and orders come in for that all the time. And I'm doing nothing to promote it. So there's a way, it's a fiction book. There's a way that you can also create revenue from a fiction book. Now, I have an objective for this particular book, which you may or not be able to see on the cover, but it says over 500 million copies sold. And we're not, physically, like the results are not there yet, but in my mind they are. It's already done. My license plate on my Mercedes says Savvy Wisdom. I imagine that when I'm driving down the highway, people are pointing, going, oh my goodness, there's the author of Savvy Wisdom. Like, I totally live in this spirit of the outcome. And at the end of the day, the best way for any author to be successful is something called word of mouth. And you only get word of mouth if you've written a great book that you believe or hope that people will tell other people. That's how 50 Shades of Grey became successful. It was word of mouth, total word of mouth. I mean, it got out there in the world, people started reading it. And sometimes it takes a little bit longer for books to have that word of mouth appeal than others. For example, if you think about The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho, and that book, the first year sold 2 copies. And he said it was the same guy that bought both copies. And it wasn't until years after the book was released that it really started to take off. And, you know, as of a few years ago, it sold 65 million copies. But there's a, you know, a huge potential and a huge potential upside for being an author. But there's so many other ways that you can go. So I have Savvy Wisdom. I have a bookshelf behind me. You may or may not see with a number of my books in multiple formats. I have it in hardcover, softcover. Audible bought the rights to it. It's also an audio. Bob and I recorded it in his studio not long before he passed away. So we recorded that. It's in Audible format. And then I created a second one, Savvy Wisdom 2. It's sort of the continuation of Sophie's story. And all of the, or both of these are based on my life, like things that have occurred in my life. So last year I was diagnosed with cancer, went through quite an experience, and cured now, completely cured. There's nothing, no cancer in my body. I'm perfectly healthy, feel better than ever. But in this story, you know, I wrote about that. I wrote about what Sophie went through, but it was really Peggy that went through this, and, you know, how Savvy played a role in that as well, because Savvy did play a role. Bob did play a role, because when I was diagnosed, you know, I talked to him, and, you know, he gave me some guidance and some affirmations and some suggestions. And of course, I followed through with that. And so now I have the sequel. Could be a series, could end up being a series on Netflix or whatever, but it can go in many different ways. But as I mentioned also, like when your book's out there in the world and you've written a book that people love and appreciate and enjoy, what'll also happen is some surprising things, may or may not be surprising, certainly won't be surprising after I tell you, but once your book's out there in the world, you'll have foreign rights publishers approach you. So you could end up, you know, someone from Italy, someone from Germany, someone from wherever, you know, some other part of the world where English isn't the first language, and they will want to buy the rights to your book. And so I've received like countless advances from foreign rights publishers to publish my book. And if you're self-published, and these are self-published, I have other books that are published, and I'll talk about those in a moment. But if you're self-published, you own the rights. So you can sell the rights to a foreign rights publisher. And what's exciting about that is that when that book takes off in another country, like one of my books, Be a Dog with a Bone, which is about determination, I self-published that book. I'm just going to pull it off the bookshelf here. This is a book that I originally released on my own, self-published it, sold it, you know, as I actually ended up printing copies and sold it myself. And then a publisher bought the rights to it. Obviously they kept the cover, but the format's different. They created a hardcover edition, but this book also got translated into many languages. And one of the most popular countries where this book was sold is Korea. I thought they ate dogs in Korea. Anyway, I really don't know, but so there's like many different ways, you know, I think about a book in the middle or you in the middle, and there's so many different ways that you can be generating income from either different versions of the book or extending from a course from the book, etc. That's absolutely something that you can do. Another book that I have here, this was my second book. It's not available anywhere now. It's called 8 Proven Secrets to Smart Success. And I self-published this book in 2002. And I was actually, it was a course first. It was an online course. So you think about it, you're selling a book for $18 or you're selling a course for $1,000. There's obviously a big difference in profit. You're doing the marketing anyway. So I started marketing online courses right after I launched my first book. And my first book is this one, which is called On Being the Creator of Your Destiny, and it's no longer in print. So I'd released this book and people started asking me, what else do you have? You know, do you have a program? Are you coming to my city? Are you doing an event? And at that time, at the time that I wrote and released this book, I was a single mom. And my son was young and I had no desire to be vacant from his life. I wanted to do what I was doing from the comfort of my home. And I thought, I'm going to use the internet. So I decided to create an online course. And this is really before online courses were popular. And I called that online course 8 Proven Secrets to Smart Success. And I was speaking at a conference in Chicago, and there was a guy in the back of the room that sold books to special markets. And special market sales is where it's an organization that's based out of Michigan. And what they do is they'll sell large quantities to organizations that are network marketing companies or sales organizations or direct sales organizations. And that's what they do. And so they find books that would be appropriate. They enter into an agreement with them, and then they sell thousands of them. So I'm speaking at this conference in Michigan, actually in Chicago. And this guy from Michigan comes up to me afterwards, and he said, if you take that course that you created called 8 Proven Secrets to Smart Success and put it into a book, I could sell thousands of them. Well, that's music to an author's ears. So I said, yes, absolutely. I already had the course done. So what I did was I took the course content, which I had transcribed, and I put it into a format of a book, made some changes, some adjustments, put it over to an editor, and then I created a book, which he did sell thousands and thousands of, and I sold thousands and thousands of it as well. And it ended up being translated into other languages. So there's another way that you can go. And then I received a nice healthy advance from a publisher to publish this book called Your Destiny Switch by Hay House. They published 4 of my books. I've received, 6 figures in advances from them, plus royalty payments. And I've sent clients their way as well. And this book, took off, and this book's in many, many different languages and sold all over the world. Here's another book that I wrote and released with my good friend, Bob Proctor. And Brian, I've known for many years because I met him at Bob's seminars. And we decided to write a book together. And I don't know if you've ever done a collaborative book or thought about writing a book with someone. It can be an interesting opportunity. And so both Brian and I had found that we weren't really, into the writing energy. So we decided, let's create a course. We'll teach a course. And so when you create a course and you teach a course, it's almost like you're being paid to write your book, right? Because you can take the content, if you record it, transcribe it, you can take the content of that and put it into a book format. And we sold this to McGraw-Hill, another publisher, receiving an advance. It's also an audio format. We received an advance for that, received royalties for the 2 formats for darn easy. But this is another book that didn't start as a book, started as a program and became a book. Here's another book that I created years ago. I actually didn't even write this. I had someone else create it for me based on my recorded content. So here's an example of writing a book without even lifting a finger. And so I hired this woman to go through all my classes on how to be a millionaire author or multimillionaire author. Should change it actually. And and so she took my content, put it into a book. I reviewed it. We gave it to an editor, and then we released that book. But we released it as a lead generator to give it away. And we gave it away with the intention of, getting people to get into the program that I was offering at that time. Now, another thing that you can do, it's like show and tell here. This is fun. I had back in the 90s, I created a process for manifesting that I found to be the most effective process I've ever used. And I call it the Power Life Script. And I've trademarked that name, Power Life Script. And so I have it as a program. It's a immediately accessible program online, sells for $197. People buy it every day. And this is another way that you can create another source of income where people are coming to your site, and buying your program. Doesn't require any more of your time. And so I created a quick start guide as a lead generator. So people can come to the site, they can download it, also have a webinar there. And then from there, they're invited to invest in the Power Life Script program, which is recommended throughout the book. And but yet it still has a lot of value. But why I mentioned this is, yes, it's a lead generator. Yes, it leads to people buying the program, but I also sell it on Amazon. It's a book that, it's a quantity book, has lots of great information in there. And And we put it up on Amazon as something for sale too. So you can do that as well. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can go. Like even before I got on this call, I was thinking about The Strangest Secret and the multiple formats that this is available in. This is Earl Nightingale's book for many, many years ago. And, you know, it came out as a record, if you may or may not know. But here's another great success story. Onyx Singal is an internet marketer, and I met him through the Proctors, and he had invited me to come and speak at a couple of his events, and he had never written a book. And I said, Onyx, you should get a book out there. He goes, oh, I've always wanted to write a book. And I said, well, let me help you. So he did complete his book. But what's unique about his book, and you may or may not know his story with the release of this book, but he got a whole bunch of partners or affiliates on board to help promote it using an affiliate code. And he did the electronic version first, ultimately ended up having, I think, close to 1,000 affiliates helping him to promote. They got 3,000 copies of electronic version of the Circle of Profit out there in the world. And then he released the physical book as well. But inside here, and there is like great content, but inside here are links to go to his site to register for some free training, his webinars. And when he released the book, and because he did it in that way, and it was part of his plan, he generated $11.9 million in 2 weeks. $11.9 million in 2 weeks. And, you know, I believe that if he can do it, anyone can do it. I mean, it's true. Anybody can do it. Like the prerequisite is really, you know, can you fog a mirror? And, you know, anybody can, you know, like you can fog a mirror, you can do this, you know, it really comes from desire. Like I think about, you know, like a lot of people, they get their own way with their own belief systems, you know, and I remember thinking about writing my first book, and I told my parents, they were alive at the time, and I said, I'm going to write a book. And their response was this: you're writing a book? So obviously didn't have the support of my parents, but I didn't need the support of my parents. You know, I read a book years ago. It's on my bottom shelf of my bookshelf here called What You Think of Me Is None of My Business. And that's a book that Bob Proctor recommended to many people. And I absolutely believe that. Even what my parents thought of me is none of my business. Now they changed their tune later, when I was buying them cars and sending them on first class trips and, you know, doing things a little differently. Then the belief started to change a little bit. And my mom's like, can I come and help you, you know, at your book launch party and things like that. There's another story in the research that I've done of a woman who actually was a consultant, and she was in a very niche market. She only worked with CXX level of executives and organizations. And she was an investor, and she wrote a book that was really designed for that niche market. And what she did was she wrote a book that had some great value in it, but she also referenced in there what she did for a living, which was a consultant. And she ended up giving out, I think it was 100 copies. We're not talking about a lot. We're not talking about a big expense here either. Like she printed out 100 copies, and nowadays it's so easy, you know, with print on demand to print a book. And she generated 2 million in sales, you know, from that, you know, from releasing that book. And so those are just, you know, some examples. When I work with a client, I'm working with a client, actually was just got off a call before we got onto this one, who's in the process of writing a book. And I believe that what I do is I help authors create the success that they want, but don't leave money on the table. And it's not about the money. It really isn't about the money. It's about the difference you can make. It's about the contribution that you could potentially make. It's about the beneficial impact that you can have on the world. It's, yeah, you're going to be compensated for sure, but you have to, you know, let people know, you know, what you do and what you have available. And if you don't, well, create it. Right? It's like when I was doing Savvy Wisdom and Bob and I are having a conversation, he said, you know, you should really do a course and call it Savvy's Proven Success Principles. And it's like, okay, great idea. And it's not something that I hadn't done before. I had definitely, you know, done this multiple times in many different ways, in many different versions of creating sources of income for books. But it, you know, it involves, you know, really thinking about, you know, in what ways could you bring something of value to the world? And like, even when, you know, Brian was doing the introduction and he was talking about Clubhouse and, you know, there's going to be a meeting later this week and an opportunity. And I think about some people are afraid, it's volatile. Like, is it going to be here? Like, it's like a risk, should I just throw it on the roulette table on, red number 9? Like, how do you make the decisions, as far as investing is, what are the considerations? And this could be something of value to the world, right? And so this could be something that you could create, and you may not even realize like what value you have from your own experience or from your own understanding or from your own training that you have. And it could definitely be even in little niche markets. You may be surprised. I remember I just had a flashback actually when I was speaking at that conference in Chicago. I remember the gentleman who sold large quantities of books had represented a woman who wrote a book called Knitting with Dog Hair. Knitting with dog hair. Now, you think about that, like, would any of you want to buy that book? I wouldn't. First of all, I don't know how to knit, and I don't have any desire to learn how to knit. And, I don't think it would work with our dog's hair anyways, but
I want that book, Peggy. Get it for me.
oh, Phil's here.
I have been there. I want that book. I like that idea. That is brilliant.
Knitting with dog hair. So, I mean, it's just an example of, of a niche market. Speaking Phil, Phil's a great, I mean, this guy has so much knowledge, from his experience and what he does, that a lot of people are very curious. Hey, you know what, Phil? We should take that course that we did getting into Hollywood and make it into a book. It could be a lead generator for our course. That idea just popped in my mind.
I love that idea. Let's do it.
Woohoo. See how ideas just can come to you like that. You could be speaking or, doing a conference. And were you here, Phil, when I was talking about the, Academy Award? And
yes, Peggy, I was wondering who you were talking about.
Okay. Excellent. All right, great. All right, so really what I've been studying lately, I've been studying a lot of Dr. Joe Dispenza's work, and I've started to meditate, which is something that I had never done before effectively, but I've been studying his, but he does that often. And I've known Joe for a number of years. I met him in the early years, in the early 2000s, when internet marketing was really taking off, because I was one of the people that was there, one of the pioneers, if you will. And, as I'm, been studying his material, he'll say, go to my website and, access one of my meditations. And I suppose I've bought about a dozen of his meditations. And I suppose he's probably, doing really, really well with receiving the meditations, but his career has just taken off, like absolutely taken off. And he does events now, like 7-day retreats, and he'll sell them out like a rock concert, like in 15 minutes. It's like you hear that, whatever, let's say the Rolling Stones are coming to your city and the tickets are going on sale on this date. You better be there at Ticketmaster.com, like registering for your tickets, because it'll be sold out in minutes. That's what Joe Dispenza's events are like. And how did that happen? Well, it happened because he puts out good stuff, great material. And, his books are really a big part of what builds his brand and contributes significantly to his business. And so I think I'll stop right there, Brian, and open up for any questions that people may have or comments. Like, has anyone been inspired by what I'm saying here and ready to take some action? There we go. All right.
Yeah, I think there's a few people here that have actually written books. I know, I don't know if Kyle can hear us, but he has a book that he wrote, and he's like, he texted me, he's like, I don't know what to do with it now. And just so you know, Kyle was the number one.
I'm on here right now.
There you get it right now. So Kyle was the
No,
number one
I said,
realtor
yeah,
in the country 4 years running. So he has an amazing credential that, millions of people want to know, like, how are you the number one realtor in the country 4 years running?
Right.
Is that what your book is about, Kyle, or what's it about?
Yeah, so the book is called Being the Best Version of Yourself. And it's basically a lot of just 3 to 4 sentence kind of mentality thoughts or thought process of what it takes to kind of become successful, and what are the different things that I've been through over the past 11 years, what's gotten me to where I am, and what do I look for every day to drive me, to push me to have that intrinsic sense of motivation that I don't need to go outside to find. So it's just things to help you get through, whether you're in sales, real estate, or widgets or whatever. But we spent a lot of time on it, and we have a bunch of hard copies and soft copies, and I don't really know what to do with it right now because I've been so busy doing other stuff, but I have a whole bunch of paper holders.
Right. Right. Well, what would you love? I really think a big part of our creation is what would you love to create with it, and set some outcomes in advance. Kyle, do you have any, like, are you offering anything inside the book, like go to my site for?
Yeah, so there's a call to action in there. So I
Okay.
do some coaching, group coaching. I want to get more into that. I do some, the one-on-one stuff's not really scalable, so I try to get away from that, try to stay out of that. I also own
Yeah.
a brokerage with 240 agents.
Okay.
So there's calls to action for, basically the coaching piece, the brokerage piece, and then obviously on the sales side, right? I still sell a lot of property right now. So it's really just having the content. And now what do we do with the content and again, to Brian's point, not to kind of boost anything up, but I was number one with Keller Williams and then number one in the country, selling over 500 properties a year. So they're numbers that a lot of people in my field would look at and follow. We just need this. I need to slow down a little bit and figure out how to put this in motion.
Yeah, exactly. Well, when I first wrote my first book, I went to a conference that Mark Victor Hansen put on, and he had, chicken soup for the soul. So he obviously knows something about marketing books. And I just soaked up all the information from many of the speakers there. But one of the things that I heard at that event was very impressionable. And that is that, when you've completed writing a book and your book's done, you're holding it in your hand, 5% of your job is done. And I remember when the speaker said that, I was like, did I hear him right? And it's almost as if he was reading my mind, because he said, if you didn't think you heard me right, let me repeat that. And it's like, if you're an author and you finish your book, 5% of your job is done. It's like, okay, well, I'm on the edge of my seat now. And he said, it's marketing. It really comes down to marketing. But even before we get to that point of marketing, and since Kyle, you have an online group coaching program, or I don't know if it's online, but you have a group coaching program. This is a great opportunity for you. And I don't know how your book's written or whether it's written this way, because one of the things that I did inside like Savvy Wisdom is I based the character Sophie on me and my life and what I do. And so quite often when people realize these books are based on Peggy McCholl and her life and learning and having Bob Proctor as her friend and mentor, they want to find out more about, how I can help them, how I can serve them. But it's like seed planting. It's like these little seeds that you're dropping throughout your book, where people are feeling inspired to find out more. They want more. And it's like a natural experience that's going on in there. But then you do have to get it out there in the world, and there's multiple ways. And of course, we're here for about an hour, and it would probably take me several more to explain to you the marketing part of it. But I'm happy to have another conversation with you, Kyle, if you like, about that further, because I can certainly help you in that department.
Sure, appreciate that.
All right.
Looks like we got a couple of hands up. Yeah, Ara.
Hi, Peggy. Thank you very much. This is very inspirational, very eye-opening. Couple of questions, and then, well, 3 questions. One, when you said self-publish, what does that really cost? I can understand the cost of self-publish. I have friends who've done it.
Yes.
I don't really know what the cost is.
Yeah. Well, it depends. It depends on certain things. I'll give you where the costs are. The cost is in designing the cover. So this cover costs $119. Big expense, right?
Big expense.
And I actually got an editor to do all the editing. She's a professional editor. It cost me nothing because I gave her one of my programs. So we're off to a good start. And then the interior design was laid out by someone that was working for me on my team, and that cost me nothing. And so, what are your real hard expenses? Well, cover design. Now, that was just for the front cover. For the entire cover, I think it's around $345. We're not talking about a huge amount of money. Layout and design so that your book is, with the margins properly, the same font, the chapters start on the right page, things like that, is usually about $5 a page. So if you have a 100-page book, $500. Again, not a big expense. The most I've ever paid for an editor was editing this book here. And this book is called 99 Things You Wish You Knew Before Marketing on the Internet. It's probably at a date now. I wrote it many, many years ago, probably 10 years ago. And I had finished writing the book and I had around 22,000 words. And the publisher wanted me to provide a manuscript of 33,000 words. So when I gave it to my editor, I said, pad it, like add more stuff, like, do some more writing around it, like make sense, of course, not just crap, like, add some really good, valuable stuff. And that cost me $1,500. But other than that, and I don't consider myself a great writer, and understand this was my first fiction book too. The most I had ever paid for editing, like before this book, where it was much more than just editing, was less than $1,000. So
That's
we're
good.
not talking about a lot of money. And you can set it, like there are books that have never been on Amazon. Like you don't necessarily need to have an ISBN number, but if you're going to give it away or use it as a lead generator, but if you are going to sell it on Amazon, you can use Kindle Direct Publishing. You can set up your account there, very easy. They've got all kinds of resources there. They'll even show you the layout, and if you can do it yourself. Some people have done their covers themselves. Some people have done, no editing or whatever, but the product ends up being perceived, if it's not looking professional, as something that's unprofessional. So you want to make it look as good as you possibly can.
Great, and printing costs how much?
Well, it's print on demand now, so you don't even have to print them.
Okay.
And if I want to get copies, and I have a drawer full of Savvy Wisdom over on the other side of my office here, if I want copies of that, I can go to my Kindle Direct Publishing account and order author copies, which are a fraction of what you would pay for them if you just bought them online. I forget what they charge, like a few dollars. It's not a lot of money.
Great. Second question is, if you go the publisher route, assuming they pick you up and all that, what are the margins there?
Yeah, and publishers are struggling. They're struggling because of the changes in the market. And print on demand has really, put a strain on a lot of publishing companies. Advances are not as, as frequent as they used to be. They're rare. I have had some clients get some significant advances. I had one client get a $2.4 million advance for a fiction book. It was a fiction book that was very well written, and she had actually a sequel ready to go. So publishers are interested in a couple things. A great book. They do like sequels. They also really love an author that's out there, that has a following. But again, they have invested in other authors that don't. And so it's not always the case, but advances can be anywhere from 10 grand to, a couple million. I don't know if I've heard of an advance greater than, 2 million or 2.5 million. I know a couple of people that got, $2 million advances. So that's where it is, but they're very, you got to get an agent first. It's a literary agent, and then the literary agent is really a sales agent. And so you have to secure a literary agent, and you have to be ready before you meet with them. They're looking for a solid book proposal and if it's nonfiction, you don't even have to have the book written, just some sample chapters.
Okay. Thank you very much, Brian. I hope you're gonna give us a link to her so that we can.
Oh yeah, I should give you
Yeah,
my.
Peggy, if you could put some contact information in the chat, that'd be great. Ivan, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Brian. Hi, Peggy. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
So, Peggy, a few questions. I have one book that is already launched, and I did it, with the knowledge that I had a house in philanthropy investing, and I did it through hybrid publishing, and then we accomplished 3 categories, #1 in Amazon, and so on. So that's the route that I took in hybrid publishing. And then I have another book, which is a fiction, but it's a business fable. And this business fable is called Awaken Your Philanthropy Investor Within. If you allow me to share my screen for a second, Brian, so I can show Peggy. But basically, this Awaken Your Philanthropy Investor Within, I have HarperCollins that is wanting me to, to work with me, and I have a workbooks, which is hybrid publishing through Simons & Schuster. So I am in that situation where I don't know the route to take, because I'm kind of, new in that world. So that's a second point. And then Phil is working with my wife in creating a movie for her fiction series next year. And then we are deciding with Phil, okay, do we launch the fiction series movie first, or we launch the book first? So Phil is saying, okay, we need to talk about that. And so we are in this, we really need help, both me and my wife. So that's basically what I wanted to share with you.
Sure.
This this is the I don't know if you can see, this is Awaken Your Philanthropy Investor Within, and it's a business fable of basically a nice story that is related also with my life. So that's I would like to be in touch with you if possible.
Yeah, that, the typically titles of nonfiction books give a good indication of what the book is about, right? Like The Strangest Secret, Your Destiny Switch, Darn Easy, like they're usually about what the book is about. But when it gets into parables, they tend to have a different name, quite often Intriguing or something so the title doesn't sound like a parable. It doesn't sound like one. I'm not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but if you read Think and Grow Rich, chapter 6 on imagination, Napoleon Hill talked about a publisher that released a book and it put it out on the market and it wasn't selling. They took it off the market, changed the cover only, changed the title only, and it took off. Zig Ziglar did the same thing. He had released a book called Fleas, Biscuits, and Pump Handles, and it was based on 3 stories, very valuable stories, and the book did nothing. He took it off the market, changed the title, called it See You at the Top, and it was a nonfiction book, and it took off. And so, it could be like, I'm not saying your book doesn't have a great title, but it feels to me like a little bit of a disconnect. Like if it's a parable or business story or whatever, maybe something a little different, possibly is an intriguing title. The thing to keep in mind is if you do sell the rights to HarperCollins, Simon & Schuster, or whoever, actually my agent is the former president of HarperCollins. The thing to keep in mind is you lose the rights to the content. You no longer have the rights to the content. So for example, Your Destiny Switch, I sold the rights to this book and 3 others to Hay House. So if I want to do something or create something from this or whatever, I have to get their permission. But in Savvy Wisdom 2, one of the things that I created was something called Savvy's Easy Code. And it's a poster that I created. And this was based on Savvy, AKA Bob Proctor, giving wisdom to Sophie about how to make your life easier, right? It doesn't have to be this complicated. It can be easy. And how about if I give you my easy code that I created? Bob never did that, by the way. I made it up. I created that. And so there's something else that can be used. But if I had sold the rights to Savvy Wisdom to a publisher, I can't do that. I'm not allowed to do that. I'd have to get their permission to do anything like that, to create audio, to create a course, to give away content, to whatever. You have to get their permission. So in some ways, it's a little bit of a handcuffing kind of experience. But at what point do you decide that going the publisher route is the way to go? I think it depends on the publisher. I think it really depends on the publisher. If your publisher is willing to get behind the book, meaning they're going to do some big campaign, to get it out there or whatever, that has value. I mean, it can have big value. And why I went with Hay House is Hay House used to do events called I Can Do It. And I was speaking at them all. They had a radio show. I was a host of a radio show for a year. They promote to their database and they're very much into internet marketing as well. And they have a big following. And so that was a big advantage to me, huge advantage to me. So that's why I went with them. So then they did give it an advance as well. And then they did have offices all over the world. I ended up flying to South Africa and doing a 3-city speaking tour. And they have an office in Cape Town. And so when I landed, the people from their office picked me up and they organized television shows and radio shows and bookstore signings. And it was just like a whirlwind trip, but it was good. It was good for me because would I have had that without the publisher? Maybe, but maybe not. I mean, they did it all. And so there are some, time when you're weighing, should I go with the publisher or not go with the publisher? It's like, what are they offering? And is it worth it to you to do that?
I see. And in relation to launching the movie first or launching books first, what's your viewpoint on that?
Oh, there's a good question. I think it depends. I actually teach a course called MSI Entrepreneur, and I call it MSI Author, MSI Entrepreneur. It's really about creating multiple sources of income online. And that question was asked just the other day. And I would say it depends. Like if you create a course and you bring your course out there in the world, I find that's faster to do. Like I could create a course and have it out next week, just from boom, an idea pops in my mind. I could do that. What I like about creating the course first is that a couple things. One, you're generating revenue. So that's a wonderful thing. And 2, if you teach your course live, you'll get feedback. So let's say you were teaching and you got people on the call right now and they start asking questions, like the questions you're asking me is feedback. It's information for me. This is what people are wondering. This is what they want to know. And so if you're hearing those questions, you can tailor content in your book to answer the questions that are asked. So
Oh no, I got that. That's for my one, but I was talking about fiction series, movie first or a book launching first.
you know, it's the risk in releasing the book first is the book better do well. Because yeah, like I don't think anybody be interested if the book's not doing
You already
well.
answered me already. Thank you, Peggy.
You're welcome.
Dave, you have a question? And there's also one in the chat. This looks like a quick one. What is the best transcriber if repurposing a course?
Oh, there's a
Is there a source for that?
Yes, there is. Well, YouTube will transcribe it for you. It's just free. No, but there's another service. Dang, I haven't used it for a while. Oh, I'm blanking, totally blanking. Let me see. Rev, yes, rev.com. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you, Madison. Yes, rev.com. That's exactly who I would recommend.
Okay, perfect. Dave, what's up, bud?
Hey, Peggy, thanks for coming. And oh my gosh, great job. And yeah, I think everybody should have a book. I know a lot of people want to become speakers. Just to reinsure what you said. My first book I wrote was called Winning Now. And the only reason I wrote this book and put my picture on it is to be a speaker to give it away for
I
credit.
love it.
So I used that one. So books are great strategies. I wrote a book with Dan Kennedy, like she said, to get on a stage. I got involved with stem cells, but I wasn't a stem cell expert. So I got a bunch of doctors to write my second book called Stem Cell Secrets. This book was only designed to get butts in seats. So books are a lot of great strategies. And, you know, for your business card, what costs a good business card, you know, your book is just as much. So I've got 5 books, but each book was not necessarily to be published or whatever. It was designed to help sales,
Right.
Help me get on stage or help close more or something, evolve to do that. So books are great to have.
I
For a lot of
agree.
different reasons, but thank you. I just wanted to say thank you for sharing.
Thanks, Dave. You reminded me of T. Harv Eker had called me one time and he said, I want you to help me with my next book. And he said, come on down to my event. He was running an event. He said, I want you to observe what I do. And I said, sure. So I flew down to where he was running an event. And, you know, similar to what Dave was just sharing is he would put his book on the seat of, you know, everyone's chair in the room. And inside was a coupon that, I mean, it's just like a page, but it had a tear out where you could rip it out and use that coupon to apply to one of the programs because he was selling from stage and he was very good at it. And so it was like an extra incentive. So you can use that as well. Yeah, T. Harv Eker.
I always tell my speakers need to be authors and authors need to be speakers.
Right on.
Right.
Good advice, Dave.
What other questions you guys have? I know we're getting to the top of the hour here, so I want to respect Peggy's time. Any other questions? Awesome. Well, we have your information. I saw it in there. So if you guys want to reach out to Peggy about anything, there it is. And Peggy said, the other Peggy, what question do you have?
Hi, Peggy. Well, hey, shameless plug. Peggy, tell us how people can work with you some of the ways, because she's amazing and I cannot say enough good things about her. She's wonderful.
You're so sweet. I just love working with you too. Yeah, I actually, my complete author program, I'm not doing any longer. I shut it down as of yesterday. And the reason is because what we're talking about here today, you know, I just want to serve people in creating multiple sources of income. So I created MSI Author. And so it's a different version. It's not like how to make yourself a bestseller or an Amazon bestseller, which, you know, anybody can do. And it's relatively easy to do. And I will include how to make your book a New York Times bestseller, because that is kind of like the, not epitome of success for an author, but it definitely is a big credibility factor that can serve someone to call yourself a New York Times bestseller. Because once you earn it, every book that you release, like when I release Savvy Wisdom, it says, you know, Peggy McColl, New York Times bestselling author. So it's there forever. So it is a wonderful credibility tool. So PeggyMcColl.com is the absolute best place. You can see MSI authors right on the front page. You'll see that there. I put in the support email address that goes to, I actually see all support emails, but it also goes to Roddy. So if I'm teaching or doing client calls or whatever, he'll be able to respond as well. So absolutely a pleasure to be here, Brian. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate you, and I appreciate everyone's attention.
Yeah, it's been amazing. I can see everybody clapping and doing all the emojis and stuff. So it's got a ton of value out of that. This is recorded. This will be in our portal for these guys to go back and look at. So thank you so much for showing up and sharing your wisdom and your story too. As you guys can tell, do you guys notice anything that Peggy did right away? She's holding up an Oscar. She's got a brick of money behind her, right? I mean, do you guys see anything like what we teach? The 500 million copies sold on a book. Like, think about what she did. She went out and had this Oscar made, a replica. She sees it all the time. So when you did that, all these guys know exactly what you're doing. It's entering into the spirit of the wish fulfilled. So she's living proof. She's been with Bob longer than anybody that I know of, you know, following and learning and also now teaching and coaching. So thank you so much for coming to share the wisdom today, Peg.
My pleasure, Brian. It's good to see you again. Thank you, everyone.
All right, guys. Be well, everybody. God bless.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.